My name is Caleb Mercer, and for the past 6 months, I've lived alone on Blackwater Isle, a jagged stretch of land battered by wind and salt, 2 miles off the mainland. There's only one structure here, the old lighthouse. It's tall and skeletal, with its weather-beaten bricks and glass eye that turns endlessly toward the sea. Most people wouldn't take a job like this, solitary keeper of a long decommissioned lighthouse. It sounds more like the start of a ghost story than a career move. But that's exactly what drew me in. After my brother died, a hit and run no one ever solved, I needed distance. I needed silence. I needed to disappear. When the listing showed up online, it didn't seem real. The pay was good. Too good, actually. No interviews. Just one email, a brief contract, and instructions to catch the private ferry at Dock 7. I arrived on a foggy morning in late October, the kind of cold that gets under your skin and stays there. The captain didn't speak much, just pointed at the island as it emerged through the fog like something torn out of a nightmare. "Keep the light on," he muttered before pushing the throttle and vanishing back into the mist. That's what they told me in the orientation packet too. Just one primary responsibility. Keep the light on, always. There's a generator in the basement, backup batteries in a sealed vault, redundant systems. It's built so that the light never goes out, even during storms, especially during storms. I thought it was just metaphorical, romantic even. Keep the light burning, stay vigilant, be the guardian of the sea. But from the moment I stepped inside the tower, something felt off. The air was too still. The walls seemed to hum softly, as if the stones remembered something. The first night, I thought I heard whispers beneath the wind, not from outside, but below, from the staircase spiraling down into the black. There's no Wi-Fi, no radio signal. I check in once a week by satellite phone with a man named Granger. I've never seen his face. He speaks in clipped sentences and never asks about me. Only the light. "Status," he says. "Still on," I reply. "Good. Keep it that way." I should have questioned more. I should have asked why the US Coast Guard abandoned this place 50 years ago, and yet someone still pays a full salary to keep it running. Why there are no supply runs, only sealed crates delivered every 2 weeks by a boat that never docks. Why the top floor, the actual lantern room, locks itself from the inside every night at 2 a.m. sharp. But I was tired of asking questions, tired of chasing ghosts. I wanted routine, isolation, peace. I thought that's what I was getting here. I was wrong. I first noticed it on the 4th night. A ripple of darkness, far out at sea, too symmetrical to be natural. A slithering motion, like something moving just beneath the surface. I convinced myself it was exhaustion, or shadows. But then came the scratching, faint, rhythmic, always around. 3:15 a.m., always coming from the vents near the observation deck. Something dry, something with nails, the kind of sound that gets into your dreams and follows you when you wake up. I didn't sleep much after that, I told myself. It was just the wind. But it wasn't the wind. The ferry dropped me off with no ceremony. Just a sharp nod from the captain and a rusted steel gangplank that groaned beneath my boots. Before I could thank him, the boat was already reversing, churning dark water and mist behind it. I was alone. Blackwater Isle wasn't large. A narrow stretch of rock, perhaps a mile long and half as wide, with steep cliffs and a single jagged path leading up to the lighthouse. No trees, just wind, stone, and silence. I carried only one duffel bag. The rest, bedding, food, water, had been delivered weeks earlier by crate. According to the instructions, everything I needed was already inside the lighthouse. The key was tucked under a flat stone beside the door, just like the note had said. The door creaked open on warped hinges. The air inside smelled of rust and mildew, and something else I couldn't place at first. like singed hair and seawater that had sat too long in metal pipes. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. The interior was simple, a circular base floor with a desk, cat, shelves stocked with canned goods and water bottles. A spiral staircase wound up the spine of the tower, its metal rail slick with condensation. Another door led downward to the basement generator and equipment room. The lantern room at the very top could only be accessed by a second iron stair, past a security checkpoint on the 4th floor. I found the rulebook that first night. It wasn't labeled, just a black leather binder, thick with laminated pages, placed carefully on the desk. No dust on it. Someone had handled it recently. Inside, typed in large, bold font on page 1, were the words, "Do not deviate. These rules are for your safety. Others have ignored them. They are no longer with us." I assumed it was a scare tactic, a psychological trick to add a sense of importance to a boring job. But I kept reading, and the deeper I got, the colder my hands felt. There were 7 rules. Rule 1. The light must remain on from dusk until dawn. If it dims or flickers, reset the backup immediately. Never allow the darkness to claim the tower, even for a second. Rule TWO. Do not look directly into the sea after midnight. If you hear whispering from the shore, do not investigate. They know you can hear them. If you acknowledge them, they will become louder. Rule 3. At exactly 2 a.m., the lantern room door will lock. You must not attempt to enter after this time. If you are still inside when the lock engages, remain perfectly still until the sun rises. Do not respond to any voices during this period, no matter whose voice it is. Rule 4. If you find a second set of wet footprints inside the tower, leave your room and descend to the next floor. Lock the hatch behind you. Wait at least 1 hour. Do not look down the stairs. Do not speak. Rule 5. There is a mirror in the equipment room. It is bolted to the wall. Do not cover it. Do not break it. Once a week, between 3:30 and 3:45 a.m., you may clean it, but only while humming. Choose a different song each week. Never repeat a tune. Rule 6. The radio will occasionally activate on its own. If it does, listen carefully. The voice may try to lie to you. Never speak into the radio. Ever. Rule 7. Once per month, a boat may appear offshore around sunrise. It will not approach. Do not wave. Do not signal. If you recognize anyone aboard the vessel, do not react. They are not alive. There were additional notes after the list. Clarifications. Reminders. Don't trust your reflection after the second week. If the walls start to breathe, sit down. Close your eyes. Wait until it passes. Sometimes the tower remembers previous keepers. Do not acknowledge them if they appear. I flipped through the rest of the binder, hoping to find a signature or company seal. There was nothing. No author, no logo, just rules. Cold and clear. The next day, during my scheduled check-in, I asked Granger about them. "Those rules in the binder," I said, trying to sound casual. "They're just old protocol, right?" There was a long pause on the other end, then static. Then his voice, flat and emotionless. "Read them every day. Follow them exactly. That's it. No explanation." Another pause. "They're not rules. They're boundaries. And you don't want to know what's on the other side." Then the line went dead. I tried not to let it get to me. Maybe it was some strange hazing ritual, or psychological conditioning for solitude. Still, I found myself reading the rules again before bed, committing them to memory, repeating them softly under my breath as I lay in the cot, the lighthouse groaning around me like it had lungs buried deep in the stone. That night, as I climbed the stairs to check the upper mechanisms, I found a single wet footprint on the 3rd step, just one. Facing upward, I told myself it was condensation. That's why the footprint was wet. Maybe I stepped in something without realizing. and the mark on the stair was my own. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. It was smaller than my foot, narrower, and I hadn't walked that way all morning. Still, I ignored it, told myself I was imagining things. I swept the stair clean, checked the locks, and went about my day. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the misty horizon, I stood at the control panel and activated the light. The generator kicked in with a low, mechanical hum. The beam shuddered once, then spun slowly out across the black waves. I watched it make its circuit. Once, twice, 3 times. Satisfied, I went back down to the living quarters and made myself a can of beans. The wind was louder than usual that night. Long moaning gusts that scraped across the tower like fingernails. Around 12:15 a.m., I heard the radio click on dot. It hadn't done that before. There was no dial tone, just a soft, shivering static. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. The rule came back to me instantly. The radio will occasionally activate on its own. If it does, listen carefully. The voice may try to lie to you. Never speak into the radio, so I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the speaker as the static swirled. Then, beneath the hiss, I heard it. A voice. Caleb. Soft, familiar. It's me. It was my brother's voice. I dropped the spoon. It clattered onto the metal table. Caleb, please. I need to talk to you. I wanted to answer. God, I wanted to. I hadn't heard his voice since the night he died, but my hand froze near the mic. Something in my gut screamed, don't. It didn't make sense. How would anyone know to use his voice? Caleb, it whispered again. It wasn't an accident. They did something to me. Please, you have to listen. My fingers grazed the mic switch. Then I stopped. I looked toward the wall, and for just a second, I swore I saw something in the corner, a ripple in the stone. Like heat rising off pavement. It shimmered and then it was gone. I didn't speak. The radio clicked off. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told myself again, it was stress, sleep deprivation, isolation. Maybe the voice wasn't his. Maybe my brain just filled in the gaps. I avoided the radio, refused to even look at it. But something had changed in the air. The light above flickered once that afternoon. Just a stutter, barely noticeable. I checked the power systems, but nothing was wrong. Battery levels normal. Generator humming. That night, around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps from upstairs. Slow, deliberate, measured. I waited. They stopped above my door. Then came the whisper, the same voice from the radio. Caleb, let me in. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The handle turned once, twice, then silence. Morning came. The lock was untouched, but on the hallway floor outside, I found another wet footprint, smaller than the last dot. This time, it was facing downward. I stopped using the radio after that night, unplugged it, even wrapped it in an old towel, and buried it beneath the supplies crate in the corner. But that didn't stop the whispering. It came more often now. Not always from the radio, sometimes through the vents, sometimes through the walls. Always in a familiar voice. Always soft, pleading, wrong. I kept the lights on, triple-checked the generator and backup systems. I started carrying the rule binder around the lighthouse, like some kind of talisman. One line haunted me more than the others. They are not rules. They're boundaries. That made too much sense now. It was a week later, a night thick with fog so dense it pressed against the windows like wet cotton. When I broke the second rule, I didn't mean to. The evening had been uneventful. I'd done my rounds, read a few pages from a book I couldn't focus on. Around midnight, I stepped outside for some fresh air. The tower's base had a narrow walkway that circled its foundation, and I sometimes stood there to feel the wind and remind myself the world was still turning. The sea was silent that night. Too silent, I should have known. I glanced out to the dark water. The beam from the lantern swept across the waves in long, deliberate strokes, and then I saw them dot figures, dozens of them, just at the edge of the light's reach. Pale shapes, standing waist-deep in the surf, unmoving, watching. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't hear anything at first. Not with my ears, but in my mind, something pressed in. Not words exactly, more like impulses, a tugging, a suggestion to listen, and I did. At first there was nothing, just the wind then. Just beneath it, the faintest trace of whispering. Dozens of overlapping voices, male, female, young, old, all murmuring the same thing. Turn it off. Turn off the light. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. My heel slipped on the wet stone, and I fell hard on the walkway. I didn't look away from the sea. Couldn't. The figures were still there, but now closer, up to their waists in water, unmoving. Then one lifted its arm slowly, mechanically, and pointed at me. That broke the spell. I scrambled to my feet and rushed back inside, slamming the heavy steel door shut and locking all 3 bolts. My hands shook. My mouth was dry. I hadn't responded. I hadn't spoken, but I had looked. I violated Rule 2. The whispering didn't stop when I shut the door that night. I slept with the binder on my chest and my back to the wall. I kept the tower fully lit from top to bottom, every switch on, every panel humming. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I awoke to the sound of the generator clicking over to backup. A sudden silence, then a low whir as the failsafe kicked in. The main power had blinked, just for a moment, but it was enough to send my stomach lurching. I rushed upstairs to the control panel. Everything was back to normal. The light was spinning, but when I looked out the window, the figures were gone. Only the sea remained, still watching, and on the floor by the stairwell, left in a perfect crescent pattern, were dozens of small wet footprints, each one pointing toward me. After that night, something inside me shifted. Fear gave way to obsession. I had to understand what was happening, what this place really was, and why someone, somewhere, still insisted on keeping the light burning. The rules weren't just arbitrary. They were protections, borders between this world and something else. I started searching. It began in the basement. I'd avoided it as much as possible, mostly due to the smell, damp concrete, and old oil. But now, I forced myself to descend into the mechanical belly of the tower. The generator stood in the center like some fossilized heart, wrapped in pipes and rusted cables. Beyond it, behind a false wall panel I hadn't noticed before, I found an old steel locker. Its door creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a bundle of aged papers, weather-warped notebooks, and a single, dust-covered cassette recorder. I brought everything upstairs and laid it out on the desk. The notebooks belonged to someone named E. Temple. The first entry was dated 1973, day 1, officially taking over Lighthouse operations from Barlow. He didn't say much, just handed me the binder and told me to never stop the light. I laughed. He didn't. The early pages were mundane, schedules, weather patterns, generator diagnostics, but about 50 pages in, Temple's tone shifted. Day 48. Heard voices from the drain near the stairwell. Thought it was the wind until it said my name. Day 63. Saw someone watching from the sea, pale hair trailing in the current. I stayed away from the window the rest of the night. Day 75. Slipped up, looked after midnight. They were closer. I don't think they can enter unless invited, but they're learning. His entries got darker from there, scattered, less coherent. Sketches filled the margins, figures with stretched necks and eyeless faces, diagrams of the tower with symbols I didn't recognize. Something that looked like a tide chart overlaid with red ink and teeth marks. The final entry was just one line, written hastily. I tried turning it off, even for a second. That's all it took. God, forgive me. There were no more entries after that. I opened the second notebook. This one belonged to someone named R.K. Tellers, dated 1998. His first line chilled me. "If you're reading this, it means the tower chose you too." He went on to describe the same experiences, the voices, the figures, the strange rules. But Tellers had done something Temple hadn't. He'd explored. I found a sealed hatch under the floorboards in the observation room. It's not on any blueprint, not Coast Guard, not military. My heart raced. I'd been in the observation room dozens of times, a simple chamber beneath the lantern room with a single bolted table and a fogged-over window. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the stairs. The floor creaked underfoot, dust coated everything. I ran my fingers along the boards near the eastern wall. At first, nothing. Then, a slight give. I pressed harder. A piece of the floor lifted with a groan, revealing a narrow hatch made of tarnished brass. It was unlatched. Inside was a rusted iron ladder descending into a darkness that stank of salt, mold, and something older. I climbed down. The shaft opened into a chamber of rough stone, carved directly into the island's rock. At the center stood an altar, not religious, but ancient. Weathered symbols wrapped around its base. The walls were covered in carvings, ships swallowed by waves, people kneeling to things that rose from the surf. And at the far end, bones, human bones, a pile of them, charred black and arranged in a circle. I found another notebook on the altar. This one wasn't dated. Its leather was waterlogged, the ink smudged, but I made out the title on the first page. "The light is not ours." The entries were fragments. The handwriting shifted, like multiple people had contributed. One passage read, "There is something beneath the water, older than the storms, older than man. The light keeps it sleeping. The rules keep it fed." Another, "The tower was never meant to guide ships. That was just a lie. It was a seal, a wound in the world, and if the light ever fails, it wakes up." The last entry, "One keeper tried to abandon his post. They found what was left of him 30 miles inland. It had followed. The light must never go out. Not for a second. Not even if it begs you." I staggered back up the ladder, heart hammering in my chest. My mind spun with images. I couldn't unsee the altar, the bones, the sea, and something else. On my way up, I noticed a set of claw marks carved into the stone ladder shaft, deep, jagged, as if someone or something had once tried to climb its way out. I sealed the hatch, pushed the table over it, and I didn't sleep that night, because something was tapping on the window of the lantern room above me. Tap, 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 like fingernails, or teeth. The tapping on the glass grew louder over the next few nights. It wasn't constant, just short bursts, always at the same time. 2:03 a.m., 3 sharp taps, then silence. No movement on the stairs, no figures outside. Just that sound, precise, expectant. The first time I went up to check, I found the lantern room locked, just like the rule said it would be. I stared through the porthole in the heavy metal door, trying to see the window beyond. Nothing, but I felt something, a weight in the air, like pressure before a storm. That night, I heard my brother's voice again, not through the radio, not from the vents, this time from the stairwell. I was reading Temple's notes again, trying to find anything I'd missed, when I heard it, that familiar rasp, hoarse and weak, echoing from the floor above. "Caleb, I'm cold." I didn't move. "Caleb, please. I don't know where I am." I closed the book and walked to the far corner of the room, away from the stairwell. The voice came closer, down the stairs, slow, deliberate tap, step, tap, step, "Come see me." "Caleb, I'm right here." I pressed myself against the wall, breathing through my nose. My hands shook, then silence. No footsteps, just breathing. Right outside the door, shallow, wet, too fast. Then something scraped down the metal, the sound of nails, or claws, or bone, and then knit laughed, soft and childish, like someone giggling at a funeral. When I finally opened the door at dawn, nothing was there, but on the wall, written in what looked like seawater or something thicker, was a message. "We remember you." I didn't know what that meant, but I knew now. This wasn't just some ancient force bound to the lighthouse. It was aware, and it knew me. That night, the generator stuttered again. Not a full failure, just a half-second flicker that made every light in the tower dim, then return. But in that instant I saw it. Standing outside the lighthouse, just beyond the glass, tall, gaunt, limbs too long, skin the color of drowned flesh. No face, just a mouth, wide and stretched, filled with perfect white teeth. And it was smiling. The light surged back on. It vanished. But something had changed. The footprints came back, all floors. Even the top level. I hadn't opened those doors, but the locks were undone. The floors were wet. That's when the banging began. Every night at 3:17 a.m., without fail, something would start pounding on the inside of the lighthouse. Not the doors, not the windows, the walls. It came from within them, like something was moving between the layers of stone, trapped, digging. Sometimes I heard a voice with it, distorted, like someone screaming through a mouthful of water. "Turn IT off." I slept in shifts, ate less. I stopped going upstairs after dark. Then, 3 nights ago, the hatch in the observation room opened on its own. I heard the clang from 2 floors below, a metallic groan that vibrated through the tower like a struck bell. When I got there, the table had been moved aside, and the brass hatch stood wide open. A wet trail led down into the shaft. I stood there for what felt like hours, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The air smelled wrong, copper and salt and rot. I closed the hatch, bolted it shut, but that didn't stop what came next. Last night, it got inside. I don't know how. Every door was locked, every window sealed. But I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not mine. Something was in the room with me. I sat up, slowly, the sheets sticking to my back with sweat, and I saw it. Just a shape at first, curled in the corner. Knees to its chest, pale, dripping. Its mouth moved. At first, no sound. Then, "Caleb." It wasn't a whisper this time. It was wet, real, echoing off the concrete. "You left me." I stood up. The thing lifted its head, and I recognized it. Not just my brother's voice now. It looked like him, or at least a version of him. Skin swollen, waterlogged, hair clinging to his scalp. "One eye missing. Why'd you let them take me?" My lips moved, but no sound came out. He stood, his legs bent wrong. He twitched like a puppet on strings. Then the lights flickered, the room dimmed, his smile widened. I dove for the breaker and slammed the emergency override. The floodlights roared back to life, and he was gone. Just a puddle where he'd stood, a perfect outline of wet footprints leading toward the wall and vanishing. I've been slept since. The tapping on the glass hasn't stopped, but now it comes from the inside. Granger always sounded the same on the satellite phone, emotionless, efficient, clinical. For months, his voice was the only human contact I had. He never asked how I was doing, never responded to anything personal. Just one question, every time, status of the light. And I would always answer, still on, until last night, until I couldn't stay silent anymore. I waited until sunrise. The light was still spinning, but the tower felt different, hollow, like something was watching from within the stone itself. I picked up the sat phone and dialed the code I'd used every week since I got here. It rang 4 times before he picked up. His voice was calm as ever. "Granger, it's me," I said, my voice cracking. "Status of the light. It's on," I snapped. "But that's not why I'm calling." A pause. "What is the reason then?" "I've seen things," I said. "Heard voices. Something came inside last night. Something wearing my brother's face. Static. Did it speak to you?" he asked. Not surprised, not even curious, just checking a box. It asked why I let them take him. I whispered another pause. Then, very quietly, he said, "Did you answer?" "No." Another burst of static. Then, "Good." Something about that chilled me. Not relief, not concern, just protocol. "What is this place?" I asked. "What is the lighthouse actually for?" He didn't answer. "Granger, you were chosen," he finally said. "The tower picks the ones it thinks it can use, but it doesn't always get it right." "What does that mean?" He sighed, and for the first time ever, I heard something human in his voice. "Guilt. It means we've lost good men, but we keep trying, because if we stop, you're feeding it," I interrupted. "Aren't you?" More static. "You're not keeping the light on to protect ships," I said. "You're doing it to contain whatever's beneath the island. That's what the rules are. Rituals, leashes." Another long pause. Then he said it. "It has to eat, Caleb." I couldn't speak. "We can't kill it," he continued. "We tried, once. In '63, burned the tower to its bones. It came back stronger. So now we contain. We maintain the light. And once in a while we give it something to remind it who's boss." My voice dropped to a whisper. "My brother." "That wasn't supposed to happen," Granger said quietly. "He wasn't meant to interfere. He saw something he shouldn't have, and once it sees you, you fed him to it." "No," Granger said. "We just stopped pulling him back." The line crackled. I felt bile rise in my throat. "You sent me here knowing this might happen. No one forced you to apply." "I didn't know. You suspected. People like you always do. That's why you were chosen. You needed silence, closure, something to hurt you more than your grief ever could. That's what the tower wants. That's how it keeps the light alive." I said nothing. The static deepened, fuzzed into a low hum that started to sound like breathing. "Granger," I said. "Is it listening right now?" He didn't respond. "Granger." The line went dead. I tried dialing again. Nothing. The signal was gone. I stared at the phone for a long time, the silence inside the tower growing heavier with each passing second, like the walls were waiting for my reaction. And then I heard the whisper again. But it wasn't my brother's voice. This time, it was mine, mimicked perfectly. "Caleb, Caleb, you let it in." By the time night fell, the tower was breathing. Not metaphorically, I mean the stone itself pulsed with a low, rhythmic rise and fall, like a creature half awake beneath the surface of the world. The floor vibrated with each inhale. The air grew warm, then cold, then warm again. The light still spun above, but its beam had begun to dim slightly at the edges, as if the dark was pushing back harder now. I sat at the desk for hours, Granger's voice still echoing in my ears. "It has to eat." I could still see my brother's face, or what wore it. The waterlogged flesh, the empty eye, the mouth full of human teeth. The rules weren't meant to protect me. They were meant to protect it. From me, or maybe from something worse. I opened the binder again, looked at Rule 1. The light must remain on from dusk until dawn. Never allow the darkness to claim the tower, even for a second. I knew what would happen if I turned it off, and I was starting to think that's exactly what I needed to do. Not out of anger, not for revenge, but because whatever was under this island, whatever I'd been keeping in its prison of steel and glass and routines, didn't deserve to be hidden anymore. It wanted to be seen, and something inside me whispered, maybe that's the only way it ends. I climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. The lantern room still shimmered behind its locked door. I pressed my forehead to the porthole and stared at the spinning bulb, watched it blink across the black horizon. Then, without allowing myself to think too long, I turned back toward the control room and shut down the main switch. The beam stuttered, flickered, then died. The tower went completely dark, For the first time since I arrived, I felt the full weight of the island's silence, and then I heard it. The sound of cheering, distant, guttural, hundreds of overlapping voices screaming from below. Not words, just joy, animal celebration, and something moving beneath the floor, climbing. I rushed to the observation room. The hatch I had sealed days ago now stood wide open, oozing thick black water across the stone. A smell rose from it, ancient and sharp, like drowned wood in open graves. I didn't see the thing climbing out, but I felt it. Pressure in my ears, hair rising on my arms, the sound of flesh dragging against rock, and then a click. The light turned back on. The emergency system had triggered. The tower filled with white, sterile glow, and the cheering stopped. Silence, stillness. I backed away from the hatch, expecting something, anything, to lunge from the dark. But nothing came. Just the smell, the silence, and one word, carved freshly into the floor at my feet. Soon, I ran, not out of fear, but because I understood now. It didn't matter if I turned the light off. It didn't want to escape. Not yet. It was toying with me, preparing, and whatever Granger and his people were doing, whatever rituals or rules they used, it wouldn't hold forever. The rules were fraying. The thing below was learning, and when it finally came out, it would wear every face I'd ever loved.